Hello everyone! Today we're going to take a more detailed look at a film I've mentioned multiple times in the past, the silent German classic from 1920, Das Kabinett des Dr. Caligari, ein Filmspiel in 6 Akten, or The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, a film in 6 acts. Directed by Robert Werner and starring Werner Krauss and Conrad Veidt, the film is about an eccentric man named Caligari who sets up a tent at a fair to exhibit Caesar. Perhaps in the original German it's pronounced differently, but to keep things simple I'm just going to say Caesar. A somnambulist he claims can predict the future. When a young man is murdered after Caesar prophesies that he'll live only until break of dawn, his friend sets out to prove that Caesar and Caligari are responsible. This mystery/horror film is one of the best examples of that wonderfully weird style, which I feel I've talked about an awful lot on this channel, German Expressionism. The Expressionist movement began before World War I, peaked in the 1920s, and tapered out in the 30s. The cinematic angle, which is what I'm much more familiar with, was part of a larger movement in art, writing, poetry, architecture, etc., that had a widespread effect on European culture. Expressionism in general represented a rejection of realism. It embraced change, bold visions, and new ideas. German Expressionist films generally feature dark themes and psychological conflicts, reflecting a culture still reeling from World War I and in turmoil over the rise of the Weimar Republic. Typically, they're heavily stylized, emphasizing visual extremism, distortion, subjectivity, and larger-than-life spectacle. Following the end of World War I, Germany banned the screening of foreign films. So to keep up with the public demand for more movies, domestic production multiplied. The economy was bad and inflation was high, though, so early films in this period had small budgets. Filmmakers found creative ways to compensate, masking the cheapness of their sets with this exaggerated, often bizarre style. The viewer's attention was redirected via the manipulation of light, shadow, angles, and lines, and the moody, surreal, dreamy quality allowed conventions to be broken and imagination to take flight. In addition to Robert Werner, who used similarly eccentric set designs in 1923's Raskolnikov, a Crime and Punishment adaptation, and directed Conrad Veidt again in 1924's The Hands of Orlok, other master directors of German Expressionist cinema include F.W. Murnau, Nosferatu, Faust, Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, Fritz Lang, Metropolis, the Dr. Mabuse films, M, and Paul Lenny, Waxworks, The Cat and the Canary, The Man Who Laughs. Some of these films were made outside of Germany after their directors fled the Nazis. They found a reception in Hollywood, where they continued to use this distinct style in American motion pictures in the 30s and 40s. While use of the Expressionist style itself waned, its influence kept spreading, and many of the most famous directors of classic horror, noir, and thriller films owe a debt of gratitude to the movement, and its fingerprints linger on film to this day. If you want a crash course on what a German Expressionist film is like, there are several fine examples among the titles I mentioned a moment ago, but in this humble reviewer's opinion, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari stands out as one of the earliest and one of the best. With good reason, the set design of this film has always received a lot of attention. It's amazing. It's not sinister per se, but everything's a little bit wrong. You've got curved walls, irregularly shaped doors and windows, bizarre angles, a labyrinthine layout of the town, structures that don't seem architecturally sound. Just the sheer number of sets that they decided to include is impressive. I'm going to do a slideshow here, and this isn't even all of them, but they're ones that stood out to me. This triangular alley with right angles drawn on the walls, the town clerk's office with the absurdly high stool, the desk decorated with numbers, the back wall painted like a sunburst, Caligari's wonky little shack that looks like it was cobbled together with scrap pieces of wood, this bedroom with its festooning fabrics and dramatically tall windows, this one shot of a prison cell where darker paint creates the illusion of twisted shadows, We have this otherwise relatively normal room, but my eyes keep being drawn to this chair in the foreground. Something about it just isn't right. It's like it was custom made for someone extremely tall. Even the girl's shawl here features a dizzy zigzag pattern in varying shades that both matches and clashes with all the lines, scribbles, and angles everywhere else. In contrast with their surroundings, the townspeople are relatively commonplace, making Dr. Caligari, a caricature with his dusty top hat, his hobbling walk, his crazy unkempt hair, his cape, and his round glasses, stick out like a sore thumb. But he slides into place amid the excitement and chaos of the carnival. Caligari is played with sly, almost puckish mannerisms by Werner Krauss, but it's Conrad Veidt who gives the film's most captivating performance. The part where Caesar awakens is one of my favorite scenes ever. Note how every muscle in his face moves, quivering as he rises to an uncertain level of consciousness. Ever so slowly he regains his senses, his compressed lips part, and his eyelids crack open, and we see at last his blazing eyes, which widen into a haunting stare that suggests he's seen things, horrible things. He's spent 23 years asleep, and it's all been one endless nightmare. A scene that I think echoes this one is from 1932's The Mummy, in which Boris Karloff's ancient embalmed corpse gradually comes to life. That's another favorite scene of mine, but Caesar's got an edge here with all that caked-on eyeliner that really makes his eyes pop. This was a huge film for Conrad Veidt. He was already a known actor in Germany, but this catapulted him to stardom and brought him international recognition. For better or for worse. For the rest of his too short life, he could never quite get away from it. Conrad Veidt is another staple of German expressionist cinema. You can also find him in The Hands of Orlok and The Man Who Laughs, giving wonderfully complex performances. Veidt became one of the most popular actors in Germany, but he fled to Britain in 1933 with a Gestapo arrest warrant over his head. He'd been given an ultimatum that if he divorced his Jewish wife and announced support of the Nazi Party, he could continue to act. Instead, he declared his race as Jewish, even though it wasn't, out of faithfulness to his wife and in solidarity with the German Jews, for whom life was becoming more and more difficult. He refused to capitulate, and now, suddenly unemployed and facing assassination, he had to escape his native country. He worked first in Britain and then in the United States, his efforts to improve his English making his transition from silent films to talkies even more successful. It is unfortunate that such a versatile actor often ended up typecast as Nazis during the war, but he took every one of those roles as an opportunity to portray the evil of the party. His performances intended to elicit not one drop of sympathy for the enemy. Veidt died of a heart attack in 1943 at age 50. It's so regrettable that he didn't live longer, as it would have been interesting to see what projects he might have appeared in after the war. Conrad Veidt doesn't technically get to do much in this movie, but even in his inactivity, he's acting. He remains impressively still, even when he's being jostled around or histrionics are exploding around him. He exhibits tremendous physical control in all his scenes. Besides the part when Caesar wakes, I also love the moment when we see him heading to his next victim. I love how he glides along the wall as if feeling his way. The other actors aren't nearly as good. Not that they're bad, but their performances are typical of the time. Overdramatic, not very subtle, reactions going on a bit too long. It's a style. I've never been sure what to think of Caesar's outfit, this tight-fitting black ensemble, which complements his ghoulish presence nicely. I'm not even sure if he's got shoes on, or the feet are part of the pants, like footy pajamas. It's almost like a dancer's costume, and that fits with the strange way he glides and steals around. There are a couple things I find amusing about a famous sequence in the film that occurs when he comes to kill the girl. He halts when he sees her, I guess arrested by her beauty, but she wakes and he goes nuts. They grapple with each other until he picks her up and hauls her away through the window, nearly dragging all the bedding along with her. It's pretty much the most awkward way you can carry a person. And then he drops her like a hot potato when the townspeople catch up. Besides the visuals and Conrad Veidt's captivating performance, the other impressive thing about The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is its story, written by Karl Mayr and Hans Janowitz, and how fresh and daring it is. Obviously, this is an old movie, 102 years old to be exact, but other than some melodramatic acting, it doesn't feel stodgy or antiquated. At least, to me, it doesn't. That's partly because it's so fascinating and weird, and there's so much to look at. It's truly an every frame a painting kind of film. But it's also got a thrilling story that jerks the viewer around and pulls off some great surprises. It's the kind of stuff that you might see in any film or episode of a TV show today. I am going to talk about these twists, so if you haven't seen the movie already, you might want to skip this part. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari employs a framing device, opening with two men sitting on a bench, the younger one telling the older one this story. When a young woman passes them, apparently in a daze, the young guy, Francis, identifies her as his fiancée and says they've been through a lot together recently. For a minute, the film ping-pongs back and forth between the two men, one of the few straightforward shots in the film, and our first glimpse of the bizarro town to introduce the flashback, which is where we'll be for most of the movie. Things move pretty quickly. There are a couple slow spots, but overall, the 6-act structure is nicely done. Each act is between 10 and 20 minutes long and advances the story, rising to a climax and ending with a significant turning point or a reveal. The last 2 acts reveal a succession of twists. One of the freakiest things to me is the discovery of the Caesar decoy dummy, which I think is spookier than the real thing because something's backwards here. Is it the head, the arms, the clothes? I don't know. But like everything else in this movie, it's just a little bit off. His crimes discovered, Caligari takes off and slips through the gate of an insane asylum. Francis goes in after him to inquire, is brought to the director of the asylum, and it's Caligari. The film then makes the bold decision to have a second flashback occur within the flashback we're already watching, showing the doctor's growing obsession with somnambulism and an 18th century mystic. You wonder how on earth none of the orderlies at this asylum detected that their boss was a complete loony bird until the final twist. We return to the original framing device. Francis concludes his story, the two men stand and walk away, and they've been in the asylum the whole time. Also, the girl he calls his fiancée is there, and Caesar is there, looking quite harmless and melancholy as he plucks the petals from a bunch of flowers. Then who should appear but the asylum's director, a normal-looking guy who bears a striking resemblance to Dr. Caligari. Francis attacks him and is locked up in a straitjacket as we digest the fact that we've been taken in by an unreliable narrator. We took his story for granted because we believed he was sane. We didn't have any reason not to. I have not really talked to many people about this movie, so I have no idea if anybody ever theorizes this or not, but I suppose you could view this as an ambiguous ending with an additional twist in the very last shot. Perhaps Francis is sane, and his story about the director is true after all. Now he's in a position where he's powerless, and the director can get his revenge on Francis while making sure that no one believes the patient's delusions and mad ravings. That's dark. Certainly there could be something threatening about Caligari's last line, "Now I know how to cure him," but I don't think that's actually the case. For one thing, I think that would be one twist too many, but also seeing Caesar and the girl acting so differently from how Francis described them, I think puts that theory to rest. It is interesting to think about, though. The edition of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari that I watched was a 4K restoration released by Kino Lorber in, I think, 2014. Before it starts, the on-screen text informs you that there are portions of the film missing, but the only hiccup I noticed occurred right near the end. I wondered if the film had skipped a couple seconds, so I checked it, and it seems that that's just how it plays. But it's a very good print, unless there's been another restoration in the past couple years. This is probably the best print that exists, and the deterioration I remember from when I saw it the first time, which was, I don't know when, 2009, 10. That deterioration has been cleaned up. I should also say it might help that we just upgraded to a new TV. I might have broken the old one. I didn't break it. I didn't throw anything at it and smash the screen or anything like that. But something happened while I was doing something, and no matter what we tried, we couldn't get it to come back on again, so I feel like it's my fault. It was over 10 years old, though, and according to some people, it was time for an upgrade anyway, so yeah, we have a new TV. So the movie looked great. I've really just scratched the surface here in terms of this vivid, nightmarish film's historical and cultural significance, but I hope you enjoyed the review anyway. These are my thoughts on The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and if you have seen the film, I hope that you will share yours in the comments below. I look forward to hearing what you all have to say, and I'll be back next time. Thanks for watching.